Hello friends. We are starting a new vlog because I realized yesterday that we're nearing the end of May and I've only read one book. So in this vlog, we're going back to our roots. We're gonna read some books and we're just gonna see how many books we can read in 1 week. So in a lot of ways, we are taking a page out of Jan Agaton's book and we're doing her like last week of the month kind of like cramming vlog that she does. The only difference is that Jan is a professional reader. So in these cramming vlogs that like she does, she can get through like 13 books easy. Us, on the other hand, we're gonna feel really good if we can get to 2. So our first book on the docket is a book that was featured on our spring TBR, a TBR that I have not touched since I published that video. This is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. It's about a knight. It's about time travel. It's about love across generations. And I'm sure it's going to be great. So we haven't started this, we're gonna start it today. But first, before we can get started on reading, we do have to go to the post office, we are gonna stop by a farmer's market, and we are gonna go to the movies. So all 3 things that kind of like make reading harder. But that's life, baby, and we just gotta live it. So I'm loving this book. This book has so much in it that I'm just like absolutely freaking obsessed with. So let's start at the beginning. We're following Owen Mallory, and he is something of a historian, something of an archaeologist, and he is really loyal to the country, the empire that he grew up in. And that in itself is a very interesting choice. One, because it is very obvious to the reader from the jump that they are living in like a fascist dictatorship. Like there's censorship happening, there's rebellions happening, there's over policing happening, and yet our boy Owen is kind of like deeply lost in the sauce. And there's 2 reasons for that. The first is because he is of mixed race. His father is white, and his mother is ? But he obviously takes after his mother, and so despite being a citizen in this empire, he experiences a lot of xenophobia. And so his line of thinking is, if he's loyal to the empire, if he can prove that he's loyal to the empire, maybe society at large will notice his efforts and he can be one of them. The other fascinating thing about that detail is that his father, who again is white, is deeply against the empire. He's rebelling against them like constantly. He's like part of several different factions. So there's a line here that I really like that explained it super well from Owen, where he says about his father, he didn't seem to understand that a man like me would never be wholly beyond suspicion no matter how ardently loyal, while a man like him would never be wholly condemned no matter how faithless, that I had always hated him just a little for the privilege of his deviance. And so I think that really shows like the beginning cracklings of Owen's loyalty, because he's aware that no matter what he does, it won't like result in pure acceptance, but he still has this hope. He still has this, I don't know, underlying delusion. And the reason for that is for the number 2. In a lot of ways, he's not necessarily loyal to the empire. He's loyal to the legend of the empire, and more specifically to the knight who created this empire, Una Everlasting. And so that's what he has kind of like molded his career towards. Like, and so dedicating his whole life towards research on her has been great, except it's kind of been like a dead end in a lot of ways. Like a lot of things are like conjecture, a lot of things are rumors. There's not a lot of like concrete materials to work with, given the fact that she existed 1,000 years ago. And then one day he receives a book, and this book has a bunch of information about her. He starts translating it, he's like connecting dots, filling in gaps, and then the book disappears. And he has a little note card on his desk. And he goes to the address of the note card. It is the Minister of War of the present day empire. And she tells him that this is his book, and he needs to write it. And he's confused, rightfully so, because he was like, it literally had words in it like 2 seconds ago. But then she stabs him in the hand, his blood bleeds onto the book, he's transported back into the past. And so the really fascinating thing about this book is the time travelness of it all, because the book he needs to complete his work was written by him forever ago. And so when he's back in time writing this book, he is dictating what is going to be preserved in history. Hello? Isn't that like the most fascinating thing? And as he's learning and getting to know Una, he realizes that she's a flawed human being. Like, she's just like anyone else. And he has to make that choice of whether or not he's going to include that in his book. And there are several instances, I tabbied some of them, where he deliberately omits information so that present time can be molded a certain way. One of the things that he omits is the fact that she felt grief over one of the battles that she led. Another thing he omits is the fact that the villages and the country and the empire was already quite diverse 1,000 years ago. Whereas now, in present time, there's a lot of xenophobia, there's a lot of racism, colorism going on. And he omits that because he was like, well, I never learned that in school. And so I guess that just wasn't an important detail. But just like, imagine how that would have changed the present time if he did write down how diverse the world already was. And so we're already dealing with this cool little like timey-wimey situation. And then it gets worse. And by worse, I mean absolutely freaking better, because he is basically leading Una to her death. He keeps traveling back to the time right before Una dies, except the more he gets to know her, the more his loyalty to the Empire starts to crack and his loyalty to Una starts to become stronger. And so he has to choose between creating a perfect future and or protecting the person that he loves. And there's more, because the more he travels back in time, the more like the memories and the experiences start to clash for both him and Una. And so although in one instance they have just met, they can recognize some kind of familiarity between the two of them. And so it's like all of these timelines are kind of accidentally intersecting and interlocking. And I think that comes with the risk of constantly going back in time. The more you try to mess with the timeline, the more enmeshed it's going to become. There's no longer one experience of Owen and Una, but there are several competing to be the truth. And I think that's really cool. I think that really speaks to how there is no singular, like, true history. History is an interwoven thing of everyone's experiences. Yes, there's an overarching like narrative, because usually history is often like written by the people who have won, the people in power. But even with that narrative set in place, there's all of the other truths and all of the other experiences from the people who haven't had a voice, who haven't been recognized, which I think is one of my favorite things about history. And I think it's very obviously one of my favorite things about this book. It is so much more messy and like kind of like than I thought it was going to be, in a way that I really, really enjoy. It doesn't feel like a draft. It doesn't feel unwritten. It feels like malleable on purpose and good. I finished The Everlasting this morning and it was incredible. I enjoyed this so much. It was beautiful, it was romantic, it was tragic, it was devastating, it was everything. And I think I'm going to give this 5 stars. I think in my heart of hearts, my real rating would be 4.5. And the reason I would dock it 1/2 star is because it does this thing that I really hate in like any fantasy adventure story, where like the villain has like a really long monologue explaining all of their actions and their motives and their ambitions. I find when a book does that, it kind of takes me out a little bit, especially in a book that is so character driven and so like relationship driven. However, the reason why I'm docking the 1/2 star and then bringing it back is because in this case, it actually makes a lot of sense thematically why this villain would have a monologue, why this villain has to go through their history and explain all of the choices that they made that led them to this point in time. Because this story is about stories. This story is about history. This story is about choices. This story is about loyalty. And so we're just bringing it back to the 5 stars. We already talked about the historical timey-wimey kind of stuff, but it also has 2 characters who are so totally enamored and devoted to one another. And it's always really great to read a story about a character who is devoted to someone. It's even better when the person that they're devoted to is equally as devoted to them as well. Like, a lesser comp that I would make for this book is the second Death of Locke. I found that book to have a similar feeling, but it kind of fell short. Kind of didn't want to lean into the devotion of it all. This not only lent into the devotion, it like dove into it. Like, they were so lost in each other's sauce. And so I just absolutely love them. And I love their love. And I just am obsessed with them. And I really love the ending. I was worried and yet also hoping and yet also anticipating a huge tragedy. And I like that the author found a way to delve into the tragedy, but also find and carve out a space for Una and Owen to have their story. This book has kind of reinvigorated my love for reading. This book has kind of like brought me back. So now I'm like so excited to find my next read, and yet also so scared because I want another 5-star book. And so I've been perusing the shelves being my own stacks. I know strategically I should pick a book that's on the shorter end of things because this is a cramming vlog, and yet my heart yearns for something a little longer. I think we're going to pick up this book. And for the people who have me playing in the background in another tab, this book is called Electric Shamans at the Festival of the Sun by Monica Ojeda. This is an author that I've read in the past. This is an author that I've liked in the past, and this is also an author that I've hated in the past. So this is actually kind of like a high stakes, high reward kind of situation. This book is following 2 girls, Noah and Nicole, who attend a music festival, and this music festival may be a little darker and a little bit more depraved than they originally think. And I have about 30 minutes left of my lunch break, so I think I'm gonna just jump right into this, and I'll hopefully have an update for you soon. So the thing that I was scared of happening happened. After reading The Everlasting, it was really hard for me to commit to a book. And in fact, I started 3 books since the last time we spoke, and I didn't commit to any of them. We did start Electric Shamans at the Festival of the Sun. This is a book that I think I'm going to really like, just not now. And then I decided to sit down and really listen to my heart, and I knew what I really wanted to do is dedicate my time to Romantic Outlaws. This is a book that has been on my 2025 TBR, on my 2026 TBR, on my spring TBR. It is a book that has followed me since March 2025. And we finished it. I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it about 4.5 stars. It was really informative and also, fair warning, super dense. So, context, because I don't think we've ever really formally introduced this book in any vlog ever. This is the dual biography of Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter, Mary Shelley. Both women are super interesting, super smart, super cool, super innovative in their respective fields. Mary Wollstonecraft is one of the first documented #confirmed feminists. Mary Shelley, as you may know, wrote Frankenstein, one of the first sci-fi horrors of its time. And so this book book is exploring their lives. And so really loved it. I love a cool biography about a cool girl. And the fact that this is a cool biography about two cool girls, hell yeah. And I just thought it was really neat to see how their lives, their experiences like directly influenced their work, and then how their work directly influenced the culture at large. Like it was just like really cool to see all of these points of connection. What I didn't love is that it does get a little hard to read for several reasons, some more thematic, others more technical. First, when you're starting off this book, it is very confusing because you are being introduced to two Marys at once. And so the first couple of chapters are like really confusing because it's like Mary Godwin and you're like, which one? Eventually, as the reader, like 2 or 3 chapters in, you kind of get into the rhythm, you kind of understand what's going on. Obviously, the chapters are labeled to indicate which Mary we're talking about. But you know, when you're in the middle of like a paragraph and it's just Mary, 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 you don't really know which one it is. So I found myself having to reread the first couple of chapters to like really get into the swing of things. On a thematic level, the second half of the book was very hard to get back to. I think I read the first half of this book like super quickly, and that's because the first part of their lives are so like glamorous. Like it's not glamorous in like a flashy luxurious kind of way, but like glamorous in the way that these women are so independent. They are so outside of like the societal norms that like everything that they do is just like flashy and new and glamorous and cool. The second half of the book, shit gets dark. Mary Wollstonecraft is dealing with postpartum depression. She's dealing with suicide ideation. And Mary Shelley is dealing with grief in ways that I can't even fathom because she is losing her kids back to back, like in different ways, but like back to back. And as she's dealing with her grief, she's also dealing with her husband's infidelity, because while she is trying to grieve, he's like, why are you so sad? Why are you not here for me? And so he seeks attention and validation and affection from other people. So now she's dealing with the grief of her kids and also the grief of her marriage because her man ain't shit. And so it just like became harder and harder to read because obviously as they're going through these really hard life experiences, they are also losing their motivation to write. And so that just makes them feel even more lost and even more hopeless. And so when I got to that point of the book, I found it harder and harder to pick it up again because like I just hated to see that this was happening to them. And it just like really stunk. Now we are back where we started, where I don't know what to read next. Except I'm happy to report that I do. This morning, I picked up Miss Death, Mrs. Death. This is a book by Selena Godin, and this is a book about death. And also a book about storytelling. And in Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death, we are also following another writer. This writer is named Wolf, and they meet Mrs. Death at a very young age. And since meeting Miss Death, they have been kind of fascinated by death. They can't seem to escape her. She seems to constantly be a presence in their life. Decides to write Miss Death's biography. And so the two of them kind of connect. They kind of share about the losses they've experienced, their friendships that they've had, and we're just following these two characters as they kind of find like common ground with one another, question mark. And I'm saying this very confidently, but I'm only 16 pages into this book. But so far, I'm really liking the vibe and I'm really liking the way that it's written. And apparently the author is a poet and a like spoken word performer kind of person, and I think that's really evident in the way that this is written. There's a certain like rhythm to the story, and there's also a lot of like wordplay, and I'm really enjoying that. I think it makes it really fun to read. I may or may not have spoken too soon because I did DNF Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. What began as a really cool like stylistic choice that was very unique and quirky became like a touch tedious, a touch too fast. What was once a woven tapestry of ideas and wordplay and rhymes and rhythm and stories then became like too meandering for me and my taste at the moment. So we are DNFing that. We have DNF'd it, in fact. So that leads us back to our original question. What the heck are we gonna read? And I've made the really ambitious choice of starting Dune. I started it last night. I'm 70 pages in and I'm enjoying it. I like can't really tell you what's going on just because like I feel like a lot of it is still going over my head. There's a lot of like otherworldly politics. There's different planets that people are visiting. There's like spices and shit. And as the reader, we're learning all of that through the perspective of Paul, our protagonist. And he has been like unknowingly trained by his mother, Jessica, to be like something of a psychic, something of a like mind reader, kind of like there's something going on there. And the book opens up with him learning that he's been training for this like unknown thing for his entire life. At the same time, his family is getting ready to make a move to the planet of Arrakis, which is a place that is a desert and has a very important spice that kind of like runs the entire like universe. However, although like having access to that spice could potentially be a huge like boon for them, it is in fact not. In fact, the economy in Arrakis is like really failing, and the emperor having them move out there and taking over is kind of the emperor setting them up to fail. His father is aware that he's being set up to fail, but he has this like thought process, he has this like train of logic that he's like, if I know I'm being set up to fail, then I can in theory be one step ahead of the people who think that they're one step ahead of me. It's been really interesting to see all of this kind of play out, and the beginning of each chapter shows an excerpt of like different stories talking about the Muad'Dib. And if you're paying attention and actually reading these excerpts, you are quickly aware that the Muad'Dib is Paul, and he is going to be something. I don't really have all the answers yet, but he's going to be a leader of something, but it's not a good leader, because he also has this like awareness that he's meant for something great. But Paul himself keeps referring to this feeling as a terrible purpose. So he knows that he's being set up for something. He knows that it's not good though. And I guess in a really similar way to his father's way of thinking, like maybe Paul is like, well, if I'm aware that it's a terrible purpose, maybe I can stop it. But similarly to his dad, who's aware of this plan and who thinks he can stop it, it's inevitable and he's going to die anyways. And maybe, in fact, Paul is going to turn evil anyways. But it's been really scratching the brain and I've been really enjoying it. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this by the end of the month because tomorrow is the end of the month, but I think we're gonna get as far as we can, and I think we're gonna keep at it throughout June. And it also feels really good to pick this book up because this was also part of my spring TBR and also my 2026 TBR. So it feels really nice to make some progress on those things. I think that's what I needed. I think I needed a book that I could check off of a list rather than like mood read a book that I'm not necessarily in the mood for, which means that it's not a mood read at all. That's the update. I'm gonna go have coffee with a friend, and then we're gonna go to the movies, and then I have to get back home to bake my sourdough bread. If I'm looking a little frazzled, that's because I kind of am. I've had a really long, eventful, but like good eventful weekend. On Saturday, I went to see The Backrooms with my friend. I thought it was great. I really liked it. I feel like it's still kind of percolating in my brain. I feel like there's a lot to like ingest and also dissect in that movie, which in my eyes is like the sign of a good horror movie. Like, I don't want a horror movie that's just like the killer does the killing things and then it's over. Like, I want a horror movie that like seeps into my brain and makes me feel like I'm being haunted. And I think The Backrooms did a really good job at doing that. And then yesterday, May 31st, was another friend's bachelorette party, and that was really fun and really cutesy and sweet and lovely and amazing. Just really nice to be like in community with your loved ones. It's just like, what more could you want? And so, because I was spending so much time with my loved ones, didn't get a lot of reading done. Like, We knew that we weren't going to finish Dune in the course of 2 days because that would have been absolutely wild. But we also just didn't make any progress at all. This is barely an update and I apologize, but in fact this is actually an outro because this is it. This is the end of the vlog. You know, we were trying to cram as many books as we could in the last week of May, and I would like to say that we were successful as far as my reading speed has been in 2026. In this video, we finished 3 books, or at the very least, 2 books. The only ones I can remember are Romantic Outlaws and The Everlasting, and I think that was it. You just watched the video, so you have more information than I do. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great day. I hope all of your projects are going well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!